Welcome everyone, I'm Eszter Kovács here at the Commercial UAV Las Vegas Show 2024. This is the third day and I am really lucky because I could get Peter from Zipline, who is the head of Airspace Integration, to have a chat with me about Zipline latest Airspace Integration UTM Texas project. So we're going to chat a lot.
Cover it all.
Yeah, I hope so. So Peter, just, who doesn't know you, in a nutshell, what's your background and when did you start to work with Zipline?
Sure. So I'm relatively new to Zipline. I joined this spring after about 3.5 years in the FAA. And in my time in the FAA, I was the head of airspace, one of our UTM program managers, which was a lot of policy development, regulatory development, taking all of the UTM concepts that NASA and industry had been working on for quite some time and trying to make it real, wrapping around the policy and regulation that the agency needed to make use of it and hopefully help enable the industry. So before that, I worked at Airbus on the private sector side on sort of the earlier UTM service prototyping and architecture. And then before that, I was an air traffic controller. So really, that was my time as a controller that got me interested in the drone space because this was before Lance in the United States. It was pretty hard to get an airspace authorization to fly your drone. And as a controller, I was one of the people who started processing different requests and applications. And it got me curious and thinking, what is the actual risk of doing this? And how can we automate it and streamline it so that a human doesn't have to look at each application and then decide if a drone can fly?
So you were one of the open-minded air traffic controllers back in the time, because that time was a challenge in a way.
And I will admit, even at the time, I was pretty leery. I was pretty suspicious that a drone could fly in controlled airspace and not pose a risk to the aircraft that were taking off and landing. So
today, you are the head of Airspace Integration at Zipline.
Yeah.
So maybe let's talk about this, why this position is created, because before Zipline didn't work on airspace integration. So it's a new thing. Why is that created? Why Zipline found it important?
It is a new role, and Zipline realized there were a couple of blind spots, if you will, where they were involved in developing a few specific industry standards, but they didn't have a clear picture of how the overall landscape existed and how it was going to evolve. And what I mean by that is that when we think of industry standards, which is groups like ASTM or RTCA that are developing specific technical standards for building a drone or building a subsystem and making sure that system works correctly. But the real value is not actually in creating that standard and then putting it out in the world. The value is when a regulator can pick up that standard and say, this standard meets our regulation over here, and you sort of couple them together. So now you have a means of compliance that as a drone manufacturer or an operator or an integrator, you have sort of a roadmap and a recipe to follow in the standard. And you know, if you follow that recipe correctly, the regulator will give you the thumbs up. And we as Zipline, this is really important for us because we don't want to tailor our aircraft design to each country that we operate in for different regulatory requirements. We want to ideally have one fixed aircraft design that complies with a set of industry standards. And then over time, hopefully regulators will recognize those standards. And that's, one, a huge cost savings for us because it saves design and production time in creating all those documents. But hopefully it unlocks a lot of value anywhere in the world so that we can deliver medical supplies, deliver groceries, deliver prescription medications, that's our core business, right? So we want to be able to unlock that path because we know that we can do a lot of good.
That makes a lot of sense. And this year at DroneTalks, the main themes 2024 is about revenue generation, because companies need to grow now and create profit, otherwise they die out, And I think this is one of the key for that, as a regulator could help, not to kill the whole industry, but because if you need to create different design drone in different countries, it's going to be very difficult for the startups.
Exactly.
And you are also UTM ninja. I just call like it. And then
happy to be a ninja.
Yeah, and we have this Texas project watching back us everywhere from social media now, probably the most seen activity in the US.
Yeah.
And are you involved? What is your views on those projects?
I'm so excited about it. Zipline got involved before I joined, but it is one of the things that I'm working on for the company. And what's exciting to me is not that we've got UTM up and running for real. What's exciting to me is that what we're doing in Texas, I think we can replicate in other places in the world. And the FAA has created an environment where, as industry, we can really innovate and but really apply these learnings, but still meet that high safety bar. And it's, I think, creating a new way of working with a regulator where we have an industry consortium and the regulator, the FAA and NASA participates in the discussions and asks the right questions at the right time, but lets industry come up with solutions rather than the regulator saying, do it this way, do it this way, do it this way.
So I think it's first in the US like that. Do you think so? I didn't see this kind of consortiums anywhere else.
Yeah, the closest parallel that I can think of is the remote ID. It's actually the remote ID group that Swiss FOCA created under SUSI, where you had several companies involved in network remote ID, and they all signed an agreement amongst each other about how to share data and how to use the standard. So that was a very loose template, and actually Gutma and Swiss FOCA did a lot of work to update that in a way that other UTM companies could use it. And then the consortium of companies in the United States adapted a US version. So it's actually a legally binding document among all of the companies that are participating in Texas now.
Fantastic. And so what's next? After Texas, do you think it's going to be replicated to other states as well? Or what do you think? Because it's good we do it, it's great, but what's next?
We actually got a lot of work to do in Texas to all feel comfortable with it. We're still at that process of getting all of the different service providers and operators onboarded, connected to the system, deconflicting their flights automatically. I think one of the big what's next is making sure everyone's clear on exactly what we're doing. When we talk about UTM, especially in the Dallas context, it's strategic deconfliction between drones. So that helps manage collision risk between drones. It does not actually replace detect and avoid. As drone operators, we all still have our own detect and avoid systems to maneuver away from crewed aircraft.
Yeah.
And the FAA requires that. But this is adding that new safety layer where previously we all had to manually coordinate and deconflict from other drone operations. A lot of times that was looking at NOTAMs and realizing that there was a NOTAM for a drone operation here, and that's where I wanted to fly to, so I needed to get in contact with that other company, which of course doesn't scale.
Yeah.
And that if you just put it on a map, even today, that looks really cluttered, all these little overlapping circles and blobs. So UTM strategic deconfliction is helping us provide a lot more certainty and predictability and automation around that so that we can safely integrate. So step one is safely integrating, but we are doing it in a fairly basic level that the FAA has accepted for now, where it's also first come, first serve. So if Zipline dispatches 10 drones in a row, and then Wing is operating nearby and comes a couple minutes later, they may have to wait, and that's not necessarily efficient. So we need to already start looking at how do we maintain efficiency so that users don't get locked out or delayed or blocked. And then the next thing that the group is also starting to work on is as soon as we have public safety operators, so police departments, for example, or fire departments that want to integrate, how do they get the right kind of priority and have awareness? And how do we as operators have awareness that, hey, there's a higher priority operation over there. I don't actually need to know what that operation is. I just need to know sort of where it is and how high, how wide, and then we can plan around it or wait.
This priority question, I remember it's 4 or 5 years in the air. At least I know this is strong. So you think it will be now solved on a way, just for my own understanding, you see the bright future, like we will be able to prioritize certain emissions and the other one's going to be first come first? Or what do you see this?
I think
it's an open question for
others. It is, and it's evolving, and that's part of what's exciting to me about being in this space. So the ASTM standard for strategic deconfliction has a fairly straightforward priority model, and it's up to the regulator to say who's priority 1, who's priority 2, who's priority 3, and then you check and see if someone's ahead of you in priority, then you wait, and if you're ahead of priority, then you can go. But you can of course think of a lot of situations where that doesn't really scale, and in conventional air traffic control, I think we take for granted how well prioritization works because it's really baked into the system, and there are so many tools that the air traffic controller has to get things in the right order, get that medevac in the front of the line, all those kinds of things. We're really starting from scratch, but trying to iterate toward a really effective solution that's not going to leave someone wondering or confused, why isn't my package here yet? Or why can't my drone do its inspection yet? We want to have that clarity. So Dallas is really important for us to start building and applying all of these things that you can test in simulation and think it works really well. And then as soon as you put it in the real world, you realize, oh, wait a second, that didn't quite happen the way we wanted it to, but because we're all working so closely together, we can iterate and improve it. So I do think we'll get to a place where there are probably multiple priority levels, and they might even take into account sort of different attributes. If one drone can dynamically or tactically avoid another drone, maybe it's okay for them to share airspace for a little bit.
Yeah. No, that sounds a really bright future because you're full of positivity regarding that. I love that. So you are a returner at this show, the Commercial UAV show. How do you like it this year? Do you see any difference or?
This is actually my first time at Commercial UAV. Yeah.
I thought you were returning because, you were with FAA, so I was assuming.
I've been to AUVSI Exponential a few times, so this has been really fun for me to see how it's different and the different kinds of products, and there's a real emphasis on sort of end user data and services. As an operator, what are you doing with that drone? You're not flying for the sake of flying. Usually you need information. And that's really useful for me to have that context as I think about my role, because if we do our job right in standards development and path to smoother regulatory compliance, then hopefully all of the drone operators that are here don't need to worry about connecting all the dots because the menu's laid out.
Yeah.
They know how to go fly. They know how to fly within the rules. And that's better for business because they can focus on what they need to do, if it's data for their customers, photography, mapping, whatever it may be, and know that they're doing it safely.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Peter, for the great detail. We will put, Zipline webpage in the description as we always do. So please do check out them if you don't know them, but I think everyone knows very well Zipline. And please follow us, give us a like, and check out our channels for more content like this. Thank you, Peter.
Thanks, Eszter. It's great to be here.